All right, welcome back to the Hogtown Podcast. This time with a guest, Kevin Bryan. You are an economist as well as the professor of strategy at Rotman at U of T. Is that right?
That's right. You got it.
Thanks for joining the show. I've been a fan of yours, from afar on Twitter. We've chatted a little bit on there, and then you tweeted out a few months ago that you were kicking off this new course that you prepared a curriculum for called Progress, and I thought that was very interesting. And specifically, part of that curriculum is progress in cities and how cities contribute to progress. And I thought it'd be great to have you on the show to chat about that, chat about progress generally, but also how it ties into a lot of the stuff that we talk about, which is cities, housing, urbanism.
Excellent. Yeah. Progress, not automatic.
That's right. What was the subtitle? Is how to get big things done.
How to get big things done.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like that's the kind of historically, if you think like across locations and across organizations, across time, like most places are just maintaining what they have or declining. So the number of places where you see like, Vienna's art in the 1890s or Paris's writing in the 1920s, or when you see like a city like Austin, or really even in some sense Toronto, like the skyline changes in a decade. That's not normal. Actually, it's fairly unusual. And so trying to understand like what the factors are that drive that, what
change from year to year.
Yeah. Like what matters? Is it liberty? Is it incentives? Is it I think it's the kind of thing that young people certainly, I think, should understand like where the world around them came from. That every bench, someone worked hard on that bench. Like the curve of the metal was someone put months of work into thinking about that.
Right.
How the metal was made. People put years of work into getting it the price where it, and a lot of, especially younger people, just think, well, the world's just like it is, and it's all just distribution.
Yeah.
But actually, we create the world.
Yeah.
And so getting that, kind of helping people understand how that happens and that mentality, I think, is like as high value thing as I could do in the university.
Well, it's funny. This is slightly really maybe a bit of a tangent. I don't know if you saw, there was this guy who asked a question of Bernie Sanders, I think like last week, because Bernie Sanders, like you said, there are a lot of people that focus on like, we have this wealth, how do we redistribute it? And he asked Bernie Sanders, like, why is America so rich? Why are we so prosperous? And he couldn't answer the question. He like immediately pivoted to, we don't have universal health care. And it's a good question to ask. Like, why is it, in fact, that there is progress? And then maybe if you answer that question, it's like, how can we get more progress?
And I don't see any reason why there needs to be any political valence to that question. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah. Like if you see like in U.S. politics these days, you have maybe the abundance folks are a little bit left coded, and the progress studies folks are maybe center coded, and you like the FAI type folks are a little bit right coded. But this idea that we should care about how we have the potential to produce more, not just more physical things, but more leisure and more freedom. Like that should be the goal of our society. It should be more than we had the year before.
Yeah.
And, I think as society ages, there's a little more like, we just want to protect what we have. And that kind of mentality goes away. And then you don't see it. You grow up in China and you see, when I was a kid, I was poor. Now there's this fast train coming through my city. Like it makes you understand, okay, now what am I going to do in my generation to make the same kind of change? But if you're in a place that's a little sclerotic, then endogenously you also set your ambitions a little lower. You're surrounded by people who don't have the mentality, and just across the political spectrum, it's a real problem.
And I'll say this without having a background in economics. At least my perception of it is that in fact the opposite. So you get a lot of people that just sort of like want things to stay the way they are. When I think there's sort of a fallacy in there, as I interpret it, because if things are not progressing, often they're declining, and we may not perceive the decline in real time, but you definitely see it generation over generation. And so this idea that we can just sort of like freeze in time and say, hey, I want things to stay the way they are, feels like sort of a false choice, because that's really not one of the choices we have. We have choice to progress, we have choice to decline, and it's really the speed at which we do A or B, right? Is that a fair framing?
Yeah, I think it's very fair. And historically, you had some great examples of, in some sense, like Western culture has been a little bit fixed now for quite a few decades. Like, you watch a movie, I was in high school in the 90s. You watch a movie from 30 years earlier, it's like,
not much has changed. Yeah.
Well, the 60s feels like science fiction. Today feels like basic. The kids seem the same, and they even dress the same as we do.
Yeah.
And so, like what's causing that? And I think it's that we have institutions and structures and norms that are not encouraging like do really radical new things. And of course, sometimes new things are bad. Like I don't want all the kids to, support Mussolini. Right. But nonetheless, there was my favorite example of this is that going back to Vienna, actually, the 1890s, crazy artists, think like Gustav Klimt and people like that. Not what you associate with like a really like straight-laced society.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Freud was around, all these folks. And they built this building, and on the edge of the building, they wrote, basically, every age it's new art, So like that's what a generation should be thinking. Is like, I want to build the thing that people look back and say, oh, that.
What will we be remembered for?
That's right.
Right.
And the people who have the power in society, it can be a problem if they're interfering in the creation of new things. So there's certain like social structures, for example, or even urbanism that is not great for allowing people to do new things, certain incentive systems that are bad for doing new things. So if you think, my favorite example of this would be Silicon Valley. People ask like, what's the secret there? Is it the money? Is it the whatever? And like, I actually don't think any of that matters that much. I think the most important thing is that like, if you're 19 and you have a good idea and people are like, that's a good idea.
You go there.
The people with money give you money. The people who want to work will become your employee, even though you're 19.
Yeah.
And if it fails, like no one cares, and you try another thing.
Yeah.
Like
there's like a permission structure.
There's a permission structure, and like you think, like in my field in academia, you could be the smartest 19-year-old in the world, you're not getting hired.
Yeah.
You got to go through this system and then do a PhD and do this and do that. And so that's the difference between like an organizational structure, a society that's like open to new things, and one that like is a little more straight-laced. And those straight-laced societies are never going to produce new things. Since we're in Canada, so I'm American. My apologies for the game the other day.
Where in the US are you from?
I'm from Boston.
Okay.
And
are you a big hockey fan being from Boston?
Yeah. So Brad Marchand, I guess we can agree.
Yeah.
What a legend. So, if we think through like the like what's going on with the Canadian economy and Canadian history. So Canada's had a relatively low rate of entrepreneurship, low rate of R&D spending, basically since the country started.
Yeah.
And so there's always this wonder, is it just bad incentives, or is it like, the country's still prosperous, so maybe it's fine. But I love this anecdote. It's 1837. So here in Toronto, we have rebellions in Quebec and in Ontario, Upper and Lower Canada. And these rebels are coming down Yonge Street. They get to Montgomery's Tavern right near Eglinton, stop for the night. Finally, the troops are able to stop them from basically taking over from the family compact. They exile a number of the people that led this rebellion out of Canada. One of the people they exile winds up crossing the border of Michigan and Ohio. And his son, Thomas Edison, was born shortly later.
Yeah, wow.
It's like Thomas Edison's father was literally kicked out of Canada.
A revolutionary in Canada.
Yeah.
Like, can you come up with a crazier anecdote than that one?
Yeah. Sounds like there's a lot of that. Yeah.
Well, the reverse, my like very imperfect understanding of American and Canadian history would be that anybody who did not want to fight in the Revolutionary War came to Canada in order to avoid it.
The loyalists.
And so we sort of had the opposite flow of people that didn't want to ruffle feathers, didn't want to change the status quo.
That's why the people in Quebec are the rebellious ones.
Yeah, that's right.
They're the only ones that don't have that history.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
But I think there is something. An anecdote, but I think there's something to that where, like on the one hand, these guys were like trying to bring down the government. Of course, they had to be punished. On the other hand, the family compact was like basically a dictatorship. Those guys were right.
Yeah.
We'd be better off if they won.
Yeah.
And then we would have had Thomas Edison here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I guess like beyond this cultural thing that persists, you'd think that a country that is as open to immigration as we are, like that would not persist as much as it has since 1837. I think you said. But it has, and like maybe talk us through like some of the big themes in your course that you would attribute, slower progress or lack of progress to, that we might map onto what we're seeing in Canada.
So I think immigration maps well into the incentives question.
Yeah.
So Canada, obviously, very high rate of immigration for the entire history of the country. Contrary to popular belief, not Justin Trudeau who introduced immigration to us, right?
Even
I guess one of the differences more recently is that because birth rate is lower.
Yeah.
So like the same level of immigration leads to like more rapid demographic change.
Right.
So maybe that's what people are seeing, but nonetheless, the immigration rate's always been high. That said, there's some really nice research on where immigrants go. So immigrants generally have a number of choices in where they move to, even like within the U.S. So there's a great paper looking at Russian immigrants in the 1990s who came to the U.S. So the ones who were more entrepreneurial wound up moving to lower tax jurisdictions, even conditional on moving to the U.S. And so Canada, the point system in some sense is like really good for finding skilled immigrants. On the other hand, I don't know that it's like the best system for finding like kind of high grit immigrants.
Yeah, interesting.
Like
you're ranking for like education effectively.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're going to select people like got really good credentials. They're going to have a great life, like a house in the suburbs, work as like a back office engineer.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. It's like a good society. But you're like, there's a reason like someone like Elon Musk, who's like literally his mom's Canadian, went to Queens. I want to say he lived in the same house as Malcolm Gladwell, and they put things together. And then he got a scholarship to go down to.
I think he did his internship at Scotiabank, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I've always thought that
that's enough to push you out.
Yeah, exactly. Done.
Yeah, big guy. This distinction between low skilled and high skilled immigration, I've always thought it was like not great because what you often hear is like, we want immigration, but we want high skill, not low skill. And what that means in practice in the point system is like we want someone with like a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. And it's like when I think about low skilled and high skilled people, like it almost like there's some correlation, but it's not perfect, certainly with like your university degree. Like someone with a master's degree in art, general art or whatever is not obviously more skilled than like a tradesman. So I've always thought that was a weakness of the point system, that like we're selecting for things that might not actually be what we want.
And it depends whether you're selecting like at the kind of median immigrant or like the tail. So there's a great economist named Joel Mokiri, won the Nobel Prize this year. Actually, my PhD advisor.
Oh, cool!
Wow,
that's the closest I'm coming. So. He's an economic historian, studied the Industrial Revolution, and he credits the Industrial Revolution for what he calls like right tail human capital. Mm-hmm. So not like the very elite. Mm-hmm. Take like the top 5% in ambition. Like what those people choose to do is really determinative. So are those people going to become government bureaucrats? Are they going to work as back office engineers? Are they, it really differs across society. Sometimes they do bad things. So, if you think like in the Roman Empire, the way to get status was to win military victories. Yeah. So the right tail human capital wanted to join the military. Yeah. People who ran the businesses were ex-slaves basically.
Yeah.
And so, like what are you, what's being selected for in that like top 5%? Are you selecting on like academic credentials, or are you selecting on the kind of I have like the most ambition in the world, type of person?
Yeah.
And you're always going to get a little bit of a mix. You'll get people like Toby Luca.
Yeah.
How do you wind up in Canada? Is like he was dating a woman who worked for the Canadian Foreign Ministry, and she moved back to Ottawa. That's why Shopify's in Ottawa.
Yeah.
So you'll still get with enough smart people. Like we have, the kind of younger people in Ontario are like some of the best students in the world. Like we've attracted a ton of like very educated immigrants with very like hardworking kids.
Yeah.
But like, which is why they're like all over Silicon Valley. But I don't know that like we structured the kind of incentives. Like if you were an immigrant and your goal was, I want to take like big risks, sometimes it pays out zero. Sometimes it pays out like I'm at the top of the industry. Like the Canadian economic system is not really the structure for you. Mm-hmm. The way we select immigrants is not really the structure for that. And so it's a bit of a choice. Like there's nothing wrong. Like being like one of the 10 richest places in the world with like a good quality of life. There's nothing wrong with it.
It's okay. Yeah.
But it's not the structure I would choose if you wanted to have like a lot of change in society, a lot of growth.
Right. Let's talk about cities. So cities is like one of the chapters of your thing, or one of the courses in your program. How do cities factor into this? How do you think about cities and progress?
Yeah. So cities kind of people have this natural intuition, which is not wrong, which is that you think of like big economic progress, literary progress, political progress, whatever. A lot of it comes from people sitting in cafes in some big city. Jane Jacobs, of course, moves up to Toronto from New York, big proponent of this idea. that it's like the mixing of different ideas that hit each other in cities
Yeah.
that really matters, and you're not going to get progress without that. On the other hand, and so, of course, we have the Bloomsbury Group in London, and we already talked about Vienna. We can talk about, in my hometown of Boston, obviously the American Revolution is stirred up by a bunch of folks there.
Mm.
That's it. Cities also have a lot of incumbency in them.
Yeah.
By definition, a lot of stuff's already built.
Yeah.
A lot of people are already there. And so, well, cities play an important role. Like, I can't help but notice, what's the center of the economic world in the last 50 years is like a strip mall suburb an hour south of San Francisco that if I took a picture, you would think you were in like, who the hell knows?
Yeah, the complete opposite, yeah.
Like, what's the least urbanist place you could possibly imagine somehow became the center of the world economy? And if you think even outside there more globally, like, whereas like the boom towns of China is Shenzhen, which was just, farmland in the 70s, and Dubai, which is like a desert. Even when I was in Dubai 20 years ago, there's like half empty in the middle of downtown.
Yeah.
And so, like, the question is, like, if cities are so important for progress, how come Dubai is not in Muscat or Beirut or one of the places in that region that already had a pre-existing city? How come Shenzhen grew like that, but not Beijing?
Yeah.
And I think the reason is that you need like enough people and diverse talent to like bump into each other to create those new ideas, but you also need enough freedom to like do new things without being constrained. So if I think in Canada, like if I wanted to do something like really wild and new politically, like probably easier to do this in Calgary than Toronto, because they just don't have so much of the entrenched institutions and interests and physical building. In your world in development, I used to live in a Vandero building when I was living in Chicago.
Cool.
So I'm a huge fan of the Master, as we call him.
Yeah.
And the Bauhaus, probably the most important architectural movement of the 20th century. Like, where are they located? This town of like 50,000 people of like no particular import.
Yeah.
Why did they go there? Literally because the existing political system forced them out of where they were before because they were trying to do radical new things. And so, it makes me wonder like how important cities really
continue to be.
Yeah, continue to be. Or at least if you think cities are important and like the capital and the people that are there certainly are important, like how do you structure your city so that you don't just like start fixing in place ideas in the same way that we fixed in place the built environment through the kind of regulatory world we built up over the last
that's where my mind was going, is that like, we talk a lot about this in the context of zoning. There's a period in time when zoning almost non-existent and cities came together very organically. And what we see today, the old parts of the city we want to preserve and heritage and all this stuff actually pre-existed the brilliance of, central planning. And I imagine that there's a corollary to that outside of like land use planning, where there's just things that were more permissive, like cities were just more permissive. Things could just happen. And now everything is a little bit more prescribed, right? And you can do this, you can't do that. And we see it in land use all the time, but I suspect it translates to other parts of the city as well.
I mean, 100%. Yeah. Right. Like, not only is the population falling in the kind of area I live in, beautiful area of the city, like literally falling.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also, if you wanted to tomorrow rebuild Cabbagetown or rebuild, good luck. It's illegal in 99% of the country. You can build if you wanted to.
Well, like the Palisades not getting rebuilt, and maybe a little bit of a different context, but effectively, right? Yeah.
It's kind of like my kind of rule of thumb on like, does our regulatory environment or institutions, are they good for X? I would say, like, okay, let's take some X that we like that pre-exists and ask, like, would this be possible given the regulatory and the cultural environment we're in? So like, I go to Paris. Paris is very beautiful. Can I build Paris here? Like 4 blocks of Paris? Like, no, I can't.
Yeah.
So, and we're building a giant Downsview airport here in Toronto. Like literally Downsview airport, the land there is the size of Old Dubrovnik and Old Nice and Old Jerusalem, like all of them combined.
Yeah.
And are we going to build like
those? Yeah.
Like we're flying halfway around the world to walk around those places? And the answer is, well, no, the street is too narrow. We can't get the fire truck.
Right.
Like this is like insanity to me.
Yeah. Actually, best example that we've talked about is Kensington Market, which has this sort of like extra protected status in Toronto. If you wanted to create Kensington Market today, it would be impossible. The combination of like small scale retail with residential, the streets, the pedestrian life, the like all of that stuff, impossible to build today.
We had Alicia Peterson. I don't know if you know her. She's doing a lot of this courtyard urbanism type stuff.
Yes.
And we were talking about, she was on the podcast last week, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, something like that.
All the regulatory barriers in zoning, but also in the building code, as well as some like practical constraints to getting courtyard blocks. But it does kind of like paint a pretty bleak picture that this built form, this typology that a lot of people would agree is desirable and in fact preferable to what we have now, we couldn't deliver. Like, how do you think about that? Like, how do we get to a place where through democratic means we put in place rules that make things that we all would generally agree are desirable, or at least many of us, maybe a majority of us, are impossible? Like, how did we reach that equilibrium? And is there like a way out of it beyond like starting a new city in a special economic zone?
Yeah. Okay. So I think there's two answers that come back to other topics outside of urbanism.
Yeah.
We covered in this progress course, which is incentives and culture.
Yeah.
So on the cultural side, like we think it's acceptable for the neighbors to stop the new building.
Yeah.
Like that's just a choice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, we easily be in a cultural world where it's like, well, your neighbor has a, orange car, not a blue car. What's it your business?
Yeah.
But once we made that cultural shift to like the built environment is, we all have like
a say in it.
Yeah.
Then of course people are gonna have their say. Like I get it. I don't want to live next to a construction site. So no one else does.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. If I live in like a quiet suburban street and I already bought my house there, like what's in it for me?
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty straightforward politics. On the incentive side though, I think there are ways to change that. So for example, like I can imagine a world where we do like I believe in Houston we're doing like block by block rezoning.
Yeah.
So if no one else changes their zoning and my block does, like we all just got super rich down.
You get the upside. Yeah.
Our land's worth a ton.
Yeah.
I can imagine a world where, like, actually I think this one's the best. I haven't seen any place try it, but I think that the property tax of a block should be fixed. And so increasing density in your block in the short run, maybe fixed for 10 years after any construction. Yeah. Thing. So any construction on your block just actually lowers your tax rates.
You amortize it over more homes.
More homes, exactly. Like these are all choices.
Flip the incentive.
So there's like many ways we can. Changing culture is really difficult.
Yeah. Although you say that, I mean, the one thing that jumps to mind, we were chatting about this in a previous episode on the Committee of Adjustments, is we choose to, we accept that culture exists, but we also choose to sort of embolden it by creating these mechanisms like community consultations and committee. If
we send letters to neighbors to say, make sure you have your chance to complain, right? It's not
so
just
you could absolutely start to just take some of that emphasis away and watch a culture shift slowly over time to say, if there's less venues for somebody to complain, maybe there'll be less complaining, right? But if you provide more venues for complaining, guess what? More complaining.
Yeah. I think it's a combination for sure.
Yeah.
Like the culture and the incentives. I think the institutions, you're right, matter a lot. Though I'm thinking like this is in general for progress, but especially urban progress. So I like teaching about the late 1800s, where people like Walt Whitman, transcendentalist, even Emerson. Okay, Emerson's like wants to live in the woods for all practical. He has a poem about how much he loves steel mills. Okay, like there are ticker tape parades for people who build a bridge.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's just a cultural environment that's wildly different.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we get to a place. I guess what I'm saying is I can imagine not sending the letters, neighbors.
Yeah.
I can imagine changing the tax incentives, but to get to a world where like people in Ontario, for instance, want city boosters. The role of a city booster is to densify and raise the import of the city. That's your job.
Yeah.
Like I have no idea how to get back to that, but that was common when we platted out the cities.
It's a good point. I watched this documentary. It was a British journalist who went to some town in Texas where OpenAI is building one of their big data centers. And they were like clearly trying to look for effectively NIMBY opposition. And this was in Texas, I think in West Texas. And they interviewed all these people on the street, kind of middle class looking people, borderline homeless looking people. And every response, like to a T, was like, well, they're going to bring jobs and it's their land and it's none of my business. And I was like, that culture is so foreign to us in Toronto. And like, I don't know what you do, because like all institutions and political actions kind of like are layered on top of the culture. But yeah, I don't know how you actually
look. It could be worse, man.
Yeah.
There's multiple universities in Europe that offer master's degrees in degrowth.
Right.
Degree in reversing growth.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, we're pretty optimistic about the future. Relatively.
I mean, in real estate development, I got to say we like degrowth attitudes are very common, right? Like when you get neighbor opposition, it's not just that they don't want you to grow; they actually want you and all the young people to move to Windsor or something, and they're like very explicit about this. So I think, somehow even urban planning itself, like the name planning, is not so much about planning for the future; it's about planning how to mitigate any impacts on like the past, right?
All right. So here's my hot take question for you. And running the interview, I'm going to flip it around.
Yeah.
Is that if I look at cities, is the entire profession of urban planning been a net negative?
I think clearly it has.
I think you won't find much argument.
Yeah, to me, like the optimal version of urban planning is like late 1800s New York. We set a grid. We say these are public lands, so don't touch those. We're going to deal with those, and these are private lands, and do your thing. And that to me is like that was the optimal.
And I'll say on top of that, I guess you'd probably label this something different than urban planning, is planning to support the growth that the market creates. Like we have very little planning as it relates to hydro capacity and
transit capacity,
and infrastructure and transit, and like those things. I think we probably need to be spending more time and energy in actually sort of paving the infrastructure of future growth versus like all the rules to limit that future growth from happening in the first place, right? So
I wonder, even on infrastructure though, I was down in the US for a talk, and I was driving through random Exurbia. And it was on one of these 6-lane streets that's got all the stores and the shops, and it's just absolutely hideous,
soulless.
But it's full. All the places are absolutely full. And I'm thinking about it. I'm like, oh man, like why didn't we stop at it? But then I think, well, I mean, the developers didn't build the 6-lane road,
right?
In fact, I don't think they could have,
right?
So not only do we have the planning profession telling me like I can't like modestly densify an urban neighborhood, but apparently also the planning profession is okay with like this town that used to have a downtown, we're going to build like a 6-lane road with a Walmart on the like I think you just don't build that, and only
One of the areas near Toronto that stands out to me is we started to see high-rise density showing up in Vaughan over the last 10 years, and those areas, I mean, one, presumably they all hoped that the boom in the high-rise market would continue for another decade or two, because it still feels very sparse. So you have these random 40-story high-rise buildings separated by these like 8-lane, boulevards with no pedestrian life, with no streetscape, with no like local retail, because it's designed in a way that just doesn't permit for that to ever evolve, to ever organically happen, right? So now you've got this sort of like weird Vaughan high-rise downtown that feels complete, like nobody will ever go there, right? So same context.
It's very odd. I just don't think that developers trying to maximize returns would have ever built these structures.
Where I see like what I don't love, where I see developers maximizing returns, is like suburban subdivisions where the streets aren't designed in a grid. They have these kind of like random dead ends because people like random dead ends, and it doesn't like tie into a broader fabric beyond like that developer's subdivision. So that's why I like the idea of a grid, and then like certainly you could think you would want like a similar grid below grade for your sanitary and your stormwater and so on, but like maybe not much more than that.
So I can imagine I should throw it online. So I spun up a little web app that I was just trying to prove to someone you could build detached housing, average square footage of 2,500 a family with yards, like 20,000 people a square mile. And this is totally possible. And the way we kind of laid that one out was on like a kind of boulevard half mile grid, similar to Toronto. But the interior were on biking and walking were totally passable, but on cars we're not.
Right.
And like that I think is probably what people want when they're thinking of like the suburban cul-de-sac. Like it's still connected, but you just don't have like random people speeding through your neighborhood on the way to whatever. And that's, I mean, it's obviously possible.
We
could build that. But you're right. Probably there needs to be some kind of coordination on the ability to move.
Yeah, including like you do have these natural monopolies. Well, I mean, some are more natural than others. Like Tokyo has, I think, like private and competitive subway system or something like that. But like you think of like subways generally as a natural monopoly, but like to answer your question, I think maybe we could use certainly like 90% less, and I think urban planning as a whole now is
well,
very
particularly
clearly
when it comes
negative.
to like their aesthetic preferences tend to just be objectively worse than what the market would just deliver,
including because they're also constrained by politics, right? Like when we talk to planning, what's frustrating to me is like we'll talk to a community planner who agrees that streets are too wide, but like that's solid waste management and the fire chiefs. And like, there's no one person kind of like tying this all together and accepting that there are trade-offs. Even when we talk about things as kind of like granular as tree protection bylaws, it's like planning agrees that they want to see more infill, but urban forestry wants more soft landscaping and trees. And there's nobody who could like determine where to weight that trade-off and like who gets to like win that one. So we get both like multiplex permissions and aggressive tree protection so that you can't actually build a multiplex in practice and stuff like that.
So this is a funny story we were talking earlier because I built the house last year.
Yeah.
So the plot was 60 feet by 24 feet. This is small.
Yeah.
Like I think about as small as it gets.
Yeah.
And 2 big trees in the backyard. And there'd been, let's just say there hadn't been a survey since 1909. So everything was illegal.
Yeah.
Illegal. Yeah. That's how we do it now. And so in case one of the attachments was like literally falling off and it wasn't even sitting on a foundation. So like we're just gonna like let's just rip this guy down.
Yeah.
Put soft landscaping back here so you have like better drainage, and then we'll just expand the third floor within the existing footprint of the house to stay the same square footage, the grandfather square footage. This is like a 4-month fight.
Yeah.
And we're literally like increasing the amount.
Yeah.
The other part of the city is forcing us to do all these things to increase it. And you're saying we're not allowed to, like, it's just bonkers. Yeah. And this stuff over and over and over.
So even that, like, there's no culture, like there is just now this culture of like, you know, minding your neighbor's business, but there's no culture for things having to be dysfunctional. How do we explain this as like one of the downsides of incumbency in a city is that just like all this gunk kind of like gets layered on top of each other?
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's not just about cities. So it's about all organizations. We sometimes think of organizations. Actually, it's a good for your talk. We actually say this in management. You call it architecture and organization.
Okay.
So there's some stuff that's easy to change and some stuff that's hard. So when you think of like a building, like I can kind of change this interior wall. We can do it in the afternoon. To move the exterior wall out a foot would like, I don't know, call the engineers.
Yeah.
So some stuff's easy, some stuff's hard. Within an organization, things like mutual beliefs that cause us to do things, those are very hard to change. Promotion practices. You mess with someone's career, you'll find out you actually, even though it's not in anyone's contract, you stop promoting people internally, you're going to hear about it.
Yeah.
And so what organizations tend to do is they're created, they start developing architectural features around the environment they grow up in. And necessarily the architectural features are difficult to change. And so what looks like kind of rising gunk in an organization is actually just a lot of stuff that at some point was a good fit for the environment, but no longer is. Mm-hmm. And we needed to have it be a little bit fixed because, like, for example, imagine it was really easy for you to change the promotion practices at a big firm you worked at. Mm-hmm. Like, that would be bad.
No certainty.
I mean, like, the workers wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
So we're going to set up a bunch of institutions and rules and norms to fix those things. Mm-hmm. But then we get into a new world, like AI comes or something. And it's like a really bad fit for this new world. So in urbanism, I think there's two places you really see this biting. So cities that grew up during boom times and then see declines, those declines can be really, really problematic. Mm-hmm. Because like literally in that case, there's physical infrastructure that's built for a different size city. And we don't have the ability to kind of adjust the way we provide services to handle the new population.
Right.
And then more here in Toronto, when we have cities growing during a time, say like larger families, for example.
Yeah.
Like all the stuff in the city is going to be, we're going to reify a bunch of rules. We're going to make real all these rules that then become sticky. You know, like changing the zoning code is like, it's not that easy.
Yeah.
Even
severing lots that used to house a big family home to two smaller homes, or
this one's crazy. Like you can imagine a world where like I can sever by right. I can build a flagpole lot like we build in New Zealand. We got like all these 25 by 120 lots in Toronto that could easily be two houses.
Yeah.
And in Auckland, they would be, and in Toronto, they're not. Like, why is that? Because like literally when we platted out this city, this part of the probably something like 1860 around here, like when we platted out the lots, like
everybody had 3 or 4 kids.
Yeah, every 3 or 4 kids. We built the lots in this rectangular pattern.
Yeah.
And like all the infrastructure built around that. It's very, very hard to change that afterward. So that's why, like, for new cities, when you think like, how am I going to get when we talk about like what the private sector should do and what should be centrally planned, like the stuff like the street width. Like the street width is
crazy.
Fixed.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't, like, it's whatever it was.
Yeah.
Back when, so for instance, the street I live in Little Italy happens to be 1/2 beat off the grid. That's why I've only got a 60-foot lot instead of 120. Why? Because in 1857, before we laid out the streets west of Bathurst, there were already 2 streets laid out.
Mm-hmm.
Those 2 streets were a 1/2 beat off the rest of the grid. So
the rest followed.
Now we have, if you walk down the street, it's double the density of the rest of downtown. It looks identical to the rest of downtown walking down the street.
Right.
But once we laid out the grid, that's done. We can't go back and double the density. We can't cut the lot in half.
Right.
You know, like people have built houses around it and they access to their garages. You have to, it's too hard. So you have to be really, really careful with those architectural features. And like the cities that get themselves in trouble are like, they kind of have locked in for historic reasons really bad architecture for the way modern living works, and then they just find themselves in a terrible situation.
It makes me think of new streets being planned with the car as sort of like front and center.
Yep.
I think of like parts of Etobicoke, even you don't even have to go out very far into the suburbs to find like 4 lanes in each direction in some stretches of that without really fully contemplating what's going to change in transportation with the advent of autonomous cars and other newer modes of transportation, right? So
100%. I mean, you can imagine like with autonomous cars, like we can just set a rule. For instance, like an autonomous taxi can't drive except on a boulevard unless they're doing a pickup or drop off.
Right.
Which would like make the traffic inside mega blocks like super, super nice, like Barcelona style. But we've already built the streets too wide for that.
Yeah.
So
and then the houses are already set back off those wide streets. So you actually can never like retake that land.
It's almost worse than that.
Right.
We're now we have a project on Kipling, which is already, I think, roughly like a 30-meter right of way, which is quite big. And we have to further convey like part of our front yard for like a future expansion. And we know because the way the city takes land is like as development proposals get proposed, they take this conveyance like one by one.
One plot at a time.
So it'll take like 100 years for Kipling to grow to that. So it's like, not only do we not, like, was that decision not made with like the current like best ideas in mind on how transportation might look in the future, but also like we're projecting out what that might look like in 100 years when this road winding actually is completed. And it seems, at minimum, it seems too bad because like it's something we'll be stuck. Architectural features, I guess you have these physical things like street widths, but then you have these kind of like institutional, organizational things. Are there good examples that we could take some like optimism from of like a reset? Like in the physical world, the joke I make is like we need Haussmann or a Great Fire, but we probably actually don't want either of those. Is there a version of that for institutional change within governments? Like you think about like the failed Doge attempt in the US. Like why should we not like feel like this is despair and we should start a new city somewhere?
So spectacularly difficult. And it's funny you mentioned a fire. There's a great urban economics paper that looks at a fire. Well, it's actually one in London and one in Boston. The value of property that was destroyed by the fire today is higher than the places that weren't destroyed by fire.
Oh, interesting.
We were able to rebuild it.
Totally.
I mean, like take Chicago, right?
Yeah.
Like why does Chicago become the center of the skyscraper? Big fire.
Yeah. Cleared out a lot of space.
That's literally it.
Yeah.
And I guess, but that doesn't solve the institutional problem.
Right.
So like in LA, we had a big fire.
Yeah.
It's going to lead to,
and they can't even rebuild the same homes. Yeah.
Build for not even density.
Let alone take the opportunity for courtyard blocks or something.
Which is insanity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The whole Palisade should be, the shoreline of Spain.
Yeah. The one silver lining to a tragedy is like we get to do it right this time.
That's right. Yeah. So that's why when I say architecture, I don't just mean the physical stuff.
Yes.
I mean the institutional stuff. But just like with the physical, so if I think where should we plan and where should we kind of let the market or let decentralized systems decide?
Yeah.
So like anything that's not architectural, as far as I'm concerned, you should be allowed to do whatever you want. Like it's your land, build like literally whatever you want. I hate hardy board. I think it's hideous. But like it's your land. if I don't like it, someone else buys it and replaces the hardy board later. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But once you fix it with the street, like, what are you going to do? The whole setback's already built.
Right.
So likewise, institutionally, we sometimes fix in place a bad set of institutions. They're not totally impossible to get rid of. I mean, like, actually, Canada has some advantage here in urbanism. The big advantage being that cities essentially have no legal right.
No jurisdictional power.
You know?
Yeah, totally.
Like, the province can do whatever they want.
Yep.
The province could tomorrow just wipe out Toronto as a city if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And take over everything.
Yeah.
And they got rid of 23 city councilors in the middle of the election.
Yeah.
So they can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, they could just announce tomorrow there's no zoning bylaws in Toronto.
Yeah.
The whole thing's gone.
Yeah.
And the Committee of Adjustment's also gone.
Yeah.
So I think that's quite promising in that, of course, the legal right's not the same as, like, can they
the political will.
Can they get back to do it? It's not that easy.
Yeah.
But at least it does offer, like, some scope that when you have enough kind of popular upset about what's going on with things like housing prices, there's some scope for reform. I think the alternative way then, legal right is there's this TIEBOUT is a famous urban economist, TIEBOUT hypothesis. This hypothesis is basically that, like, the more decentralized decision making on urban quality is, the better, because you actually normally don't think of governments competing, but in some sense you do have to compete for people to move there and businesses to move there and so on.
Yeah.
And so the fact that people can move, it gives incentive for governments to kind of get things right. Like, I mean, we're watching this right now in Ontario. Like, because of immigration, we're not seeing population fall. But how many years in a row is net immigration out of Ontario? Net domestic migration has been terrible for many, many, many years. If it wasn't for immigration, we would look like, upstate New York, like, literally.
I remember when Alberta was advertising to recruit Ontarians to move over to Calgary, right?
Like, why the jobs pay more on the housing cheaper?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that should be, at least in part, that will push cities to try to fix some things that they otherwise would be like, I don't want to cause a political fight or whatever.
Yeah.
Because, like, you're losing your businesses at some point. So that's why I'm most worried, actually, the Torontos or even my hometown Boston and the San Franciscos. The problem is that they're, like, playing on easy mode.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Silicon Valley just throws out new companies. Here in Boston, it's like, if Facebook was founded in, like, Winnipeg and moved out, every single development meeting in Winnipeg would be like, what the hell did we do? How did we lose one of the biggest companies in the world? Facebook left Boston. Literally no one cares, because, like, Harvard and MIT and the university are throwing out new companies every year. No, they're rich as heck, And so Toronto also, because of the financial sector, like, they're never really in that much trouble. And so they don't have to put the effort that Calgary puts in to their development and their urbanism.
But I also think of it as, like, which level of decision maker is, like, what their incentive is. Because when I think about Toronto's wards, you don't see councillors, like, competing for more development activity in their wards. In fact, you see the opposite, where they say, like, why don't you go move to Scarborough or something like that? Because their incentive, like, they don't get rewarded based on economic activity. They get rewarded based on, like, incumbent voters being happy that the status quo has been maintained. And, like, and maybe that's why you need, rather than this kind of, like, decentralized competitive landscape between wards or cities, you need actually a higher level of government to just kind of, like, force and impose it on, which was, I guess, your first answer.
So it's good. I think it can work either way. Chicago's really interesting, not the, in Chicago, you vote early and often.
Yeah.
Center of political corruption for I don't know, a century. We did have 3 straight governors go to jail, which is quite a tip of the cap.
Yeah.
Wow.
Illinois.
Detroit, I think, has had a few mayors as well. Yeah.
So Chicago, the corruption does do one thing well, which is that the aldermen, the equivalent city councilors in Chicago, historically, like, you don't interfere in building decisions in another alderman's district.
Right.
Okay? Like, it just is like rubber stamp if it's in our district. There's nonstop corruption in building because of this. That said, like, the main donors in, like, every alderman's district are coming from, like, the building sector, and, like, you don't get it built here. I just moved one city council district away and I get it built there. And, like, actually you wind up having quite a lot of building happen in the city because I don't have to go through council. I don't go there. The committee is like, I just go to the alderman's office.
Yeah.
and shake his hand, put a few dollars, and then the thing is built. Which seems like obviously this is not the optimal way to get things built, but it is.
But the incentives are better aligned.
Yeah, that's right. The point is that there are ways to better align the incentives. Like I can imagine a world where the province says you can do kind of whatever you want. I mean, like I was talking to a guy, I'm trying to remember his name, he's a developer down in LA, and he's like, they can say that, but like the city can slow down.
Yes,
they can slow
absolutely.
The electric. There's like a million things they can do if they don't want you to build.
Totally.
So like if you think of like the builder's remedy in California, in theory, I can build like basically whatever I want in a whole bunch of California cities that didn't zone for density. In practice, if I actually tried to do that, the city would just screw me over
on your utility, your lane closure, like everything.
100%.
Yeah.
And so, like, how do you like take away every single bottleneck to the people?
It's very hard.
So in some sense, it's easier to get the incentives aligned than to try to get rid of all the bottlenecks to have bad incentives.
Yeah, I think we see this all the time between the province of Ontario and the city of Toronto. The province will change a policy, and they'll be very specific in how they want the policy changed, and then the city will find some creative new wording to effectively get around this new policy to the same outcome that they had before, right? We saw this with laneway suites and garden suites, where they were requiring angular planes on the roof of the rear structure, and then the province said no more angular planes, and then the city said okay, no problem, and they renamed them to sloped roofs, and now there's sloped roofs in the bylaw. So, but it's the same design, right? So, if they want to slow you down and make your life a nightmare, they can.
So this is a great example of decentralized progress, though,
right?
Where I think planning can really make mistakes. So the angular plane rule, this one just drives me crazy. Okay. So I'm sure at some point they did a calculation like, here's the cost of framing at the angle. Here's the cost of framing not at the angle. We lose this many square feet. Okay. It's worth it. But like, you just literally banned all mass-produced ADUs in the city of Toronto.
It's actually
because no one else has those rules.
It's worse than that. They didn't do that calculation. They just said it's worth it. 100%. They did not do that calculation.
At least you can imagine.
Yeah, sure.
But it's because that they.
I just now killed the bedroom.
They don't know what they don't know.
I killed the bedroom and made it more expensive to build.
It's the same thing.
Great outcome, right?
We talk a lot about our buildings. Like we now build mid-rise buildings with precast concrete slabs and shafts. And we could only now do that because we could build boxes. When you had to have a transfer slab at every floor because you were stepping back at every floor, it had to be cast in place with its own rebar kind of ratios that you don't get typically in precast. So it's totally right. It's like all these kind of unintended consequences of being too prescriptive.
Yeah, just like one little thing. So that like one of my I always teach in my management class, Katera, you might remember the kind of modular building.
Yeah, of course.
We always teach about these and like what went wrong. And the answer is like, obviously it makes a ton of sense, like build like a wall unit with the, all the mechanicals already built in and the insulation already in, and don't even need drywall anymore because like whatever, I'll just use ply and make it look nicer anyway. And we know how to build. There's nothing complicated about building these. And if we build them at scale, we can get them quite cheap. But if you have one rule in the city on like
that differs you
expect an electric or whatever it happens to be,
it doesn't work.
One rule, you killed off the entire business.
Yeah.
And like
across every city that you might want to sell into, right? Yeah.
Because they're not the same rule.
Yeah.
And like imagine if we had this rule where it's like to buy a car, you have to there's like the city car bylaw, and this city requires like the door to open with a handle that's shaped like at a diagonal, and the city wants it shaped at a horizontal, and like it's obvious. What would that do to the cost of buying a car?
Cars would be very expensive.
They'd be very expensive. They'd all be like custom built. I
think there's a version of this in California, right, where they have different emission standards than the rest of the country, and it makes the cars in California more expensive.
And imagine it wasn't just California. Imagine it was like
every city,
Modesto.
Yeah.
And this seems like it's like the problem is this downstream of belief that where we get good things is from central planning, and it's not that there aren't uses of central planning for good things. So again, like laying out the grid, I think is a great example. But like if you fix the world as it is, and you don't believe that people are trying to make new things happen and reduce costs and try out new techniques to build things, and the regulatory environment is unusual and prescriptive, like you just guaranteed it's going to be expensive, guaranteed. And we don't have to do that for urbanism. Like we could be, it's actually insane. It's like the biggest public policy problem in Ontario is the cost of housing. Like, I mean, in the U.S. the same way. You look at like, I talk to my friends in say California. I'm not conservative guy myself, but like, you have all these policies to help like poorer people, working class people, etc. And yet you have net out migration of working class people to places like Texas that has like none of these supports.
Yeah.
Why? Because the average person would trade all of those policies for cheaper housing.
For lower rent.
Yeah.
And like, and the cheaper housing comes from like a better regulatory environment.
I was saying, never mind. They're not getting their lower rents from inclusionary zoning or affordable housing. Like, it's just, they're just building. So everything that we're doing here in Toronto to ensure more affordable housing is not what they're doing, and their housing is much more affordable.
What's your take on, I don't know that I could ever envision a version of this in Canada, but what's your take on charter cities or these like sort of new startup cities in the US that are popping up, or at least that are being talked a lot about?
Places like California Forever.
California Forever would be a big example, but there's smaller little versions all over the place, right? It seems.
Yeah. Or I mean, even if you go like the kind of places like Irvine, are obviously charter cities. It's still owned by the Irvine company, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Land is basically free. Like if people, not you guys, but people in the real world think, housing expensive because land is expensive. It's like there was just a ranch, huge, something like 70 square miles. Okay, it was outside San Francisco, so it's about, as the crow flies, about 30 miles from Oakland, 30 miles from San Jose. It's a huge ranch. The land is like a little hilly, but it's not mountains or anything. Okay, this land sold for $68 million.
Yeah.
70 square miles of land. So you can like do the math on like quarter acre or half or 1/8 acre lots. It's like $100, $100.
Yeah.
The land is free.
Yeah.
Right? So you might think like, why don't I just plat out new cities? So answer one is, as Jan from California Forever is figuring out, it's like, you're not allowed to. That's why they sold for $68 million.
Yeah.
Because everyone knows you can never build anything under any circumstance there. But number two is like really charter cities where you're separated in distance. So the agglomerative effects of cities are really hard to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
So incomes in rural areas in Canada would be something like 30% lower than in cities similar in the US. Like good rule of thumb, there's like kind of a scaling law that is I double size of cities, my productivity is going to go up like 15% on average. So essentially, it's very hard to bring people to a new city that's not within the same metro area as another one, and you're kind of bound by a bunch of the existing incomes.
Then you're just a suburb.
You're just a suburb.
Yeah.
Now, I wonder how true that really is. So historically, how do we get new cities? We built them around some kind of focusing device, like when we were using water for energy or for trade, we'd put like Pittsburgh where the rivers intersect. Or Pittsburgh also, like where there's a bunch of oil right underneath the ground, right? The original Dubai, Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So you can imagine I want to set up a new city. I'm going to buy like a big chunk of land in like, somewhere like southern Alberta is actually like great weather by Canadian standards, or somewhere.
I love southern Alberta. I drive through there. My in-laws live not far from there. And every time I drive through there, I'm like, why are there not more people here? This is a beautiful place. It really is.
It's nice, right?
Yeah.
And not frigid, sun shining.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, like it's basically the same weather as like Boise, which is a booming city, so it's really possible. So if you wanted to put a city there, like you probably need some kind of like, we've got like a new well-funded university built by some rich guy. We've got like the headquarters of a major company.
Some central
kind of
anchor tenant of some sort. Yeah.
It's like when you're building a mall, you need the anchor tenant.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it's impossible. And I wonder.
There's a lot of stars aligning, though.
Yeah. And also like, there's really nowhere where you can actually do anything you want anymore. Like when you went out west, you just platted out the city, did what you wanted. Now there are people that can stop you, even if you're.
You're probably right that Alberta is probably the closest you'd get to.
You can do what you want.
Some permissionless structure. Yeah.
Given the scaling law that you mentioned, what was it? Doubling in size increases productivity by
15%, something in that ballpark.
given that like the whole world is now hyper regulated, like you'd think that you'd be better off focusing that deregulatory energy at like an existing city to like become 30% larger rather than kind of like seed a new one. And maybe that's why we're not seeing many of these.
Yeah. So the existing cities obviously have the advantage that I already have people,
Yeah.
already have the business, and already have the, for sure. They have the downside that they have all the
incumbency,
yeah, both
right.
both in norms and in physical layout. Like, I don't know, like imagine if you built a city in, I mean, Southern Ontario is half empty also. So imagine you build in Southern Ontario a city of 100,000. We're going to put a ton of money. We're going to have a few like anchors, and it's going to be built in like a very walkable, human-centered scale. Like effectively, it's going to be 5 square miles of half Paris density. That's about 100,000 people. Like, I don't know. I think it'd be very, very popular to live in.
There's a version of this, I forget what it's called, but like off just north of Barrie, I think it's called Friday Harbor or something, where
Friday Harbor.
They carved into the waterfront like basically a canal system and built like stacked condos all along it. And it's got like that density of like a Venice,
but sort of like a cottage alternative market.
Yeah, well, I think also retirees, but yeah, not
like an economic center, right? It's more like
the only like anchoring features that I could think about are things like that or ski hills, where you see these like villages developing around ski hills. Yeah. But like the economic one, it just seems like that cold start problem to be more desirable than just like making an existing city somehow better. It seems like much harder.
Yeah, I mean, retiree villages are definitely a good example.
Yeah.
Of kind of, you know, what's interesting, like people complain about North American urbanism and what we're building. It's like, but you go to like the new Universal Studios and it's like unbelievable urbanism. You got like various retirement communities.
Like Tremblant.
Lovely.
It's a courtyard block.
And, you know, of course, you know, like we know how to build it.
Yeah.
We just, there's cultural barriers, there's institutional barriers, and incentive barriers to building it. The other tough thing for new cities too is that you know, other than AI, the biggest like macro factor in the world right now is worldwide. Forget about the West. So worldwide, the peak number of births was 2013. The number of births every year is going down.
Yeah.
Okay. So like right now we can rely on net immigration to kind of keep population growth up.
Yeah.
But like most places are not going to be in a net population increase very soon. I want to say something like the outside of sub-Saharan Africa, like global population will be declining within 15 years.
Yeah, when you say
like overall, the
birth rates have slowed down, we're not on a decline yet. We're just slowing down the pace of growth globally.
Globally, the number of births per year is declining every year,
but not to below replacement rate yet. Because that would be like a Western phenomenon, right? This idea of like we're producing less than 2 kids per woman.
So globally, we're right about 2.1.
Okay.
I mean, it has to be the number of births per year has been going down for 13 years now.
Yeah.
Worldwide.
Yeah.
And this is like really being held up by sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like if I were thinking like laying out new cities today or new institutions.
Because we actually have all these ghost towns that could probably be repopulated before you have to start fresh in the desert.
Yeah. So maybe something like that is a bit.
You got to go somewhere where like things are like, I think of Windsor, where like the outlook of the auto industry is like pretty bleak. And it's like, well, you have a city. And it's going to get worse and worse to live there. It's more expensive, less job prospects. Maybe at some point that city gets desperate enough to say, hey, we're going to dramatically reform the future of Windsor. And now we want to be the next great city in Canada. Let's rebuild, right? Like a Detroit story.
Yeah.
You need the mayor and the council population to be like, what do we want in Windsor? 1 million people.
Yeah.
In the country. Like, you should be upset. Honestly, you should be upset if that's not the mentality of the people in charge. People in charge should be thinking, like, you look around, you see that beautiful museum, how come we're not building it now? You see that nice park, how come we're not building that now? You know, like you see that neighborhood everyone loves, why isn't it going up today? You don't build it today, that's 10 years we just wasted.
Right.
You know?
One way to measure progress is GDP growth. There was this paper, I can't pronounce the name, but HSIEH and Moretti, which had some controversy because I think like there were some calculation errors, but basically showing that if you took like the 10 biggest cities, and you're going to correct me on all this, 10 biggest cities in America, and you made them as permissive on their land use planning as like, you know, the most permissive of those 10, like you'd get like 4 extra points of growth or something per year. I'm getting all the numbers wrong, but like the general idea that like there's this hugely underrated lever of just like upzoning existing cities and not to like an unheard of level, but like match Toronto to Montreal. And that would be like dramatic. Yeah.
I mean, like what would be, There's a lot of like technical complaints about Sean Moretti,
Yeah.
but I mean, Enrico Moretti is like one of the most famous urban economists in the world. Like, he's not a hack; he knows what he's talking about. It's like if San Francisco, if Silicon Valley could build like Shenzhen, it would look like Shenzhen.
Yeah.
Like that would be the kind of decentralized outcome.
Yeah.
Like there would be, massive skyscrapers up and down Sand Hill Road.
Yeah.
And there would be 10 million people who are benefiting from being in essentially the world's most productive region.
Right.
Instead, like people who aren't super rich are literally moving out of the world's most productive. This is insanity.
Yeah.
Like, why would you have people moving out? Like in Ontario, people leaving Toronto to go move to Peterborough.
It's crazy. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's a massive policy failure.
Yeah.
Something against Peterborough, but
you should be going like the way labor mobility should work is you go to where the jobs are, not go away from it.
Until maybe retirement, and then
that's right. I mean, you or at the very least, people have heterogeneous preferences. Some people want to be in a smaller town.
Sure,
obviously, totally fine.
Yeah.
The problem is when people want to be in the bigger town, making more money in the bigger town.
Yeah. Commuting less.
Yeah.
But there are policy constraints to allow them.
Because of policy problems, they have to move out to the exurbs or just move to a different city altogether.
Yeah.
And the numbers are honestly Ontario. I don't think people understand how bad it is. I looked at this a while ago, so I probably should have verified this before I say it on the air. But I believe that over the last decade, net out-migration as a percentage of population is worse in the GTA than it is in the Detroit metro area.
Wow. We should look that up. Yeah.
Yeah, that is shocking, but not surprising, frankly. At least directionally, that doesn't surprise me. The absolute number, we can verify. But
I'm almost certain it's right.
Yeah.
I mean, you just have to think about like what has happened over the last 10, let alone 20 years in Ontario, that would feel like a massive win to assert ourselves as an economic center, to actually grow our relative sort of economic influence in the country,
and
let
improve
alone
the
North America.
affordability.
Like nothing stands out. It's all just been managed either status quo or decline, right?
Maybe there's some
entire adult life.
There might be some scope here, actually. Like I've lived in Canada for 12 years, so I mean, certainly when I came, I was very surprised by the level of ambition by smart people, and not in a positive way.
Yeah, say more about that as an outsider. Yeah,
I mean, I have top students at the university who's like, what do you want to do? And they're like, I want to go work at RBC.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah.
Like that's your ambition? Because that wasn't what my top students in the US ambition was.
Yeah.
And then it kind of got better. I want to compete with Google.
Yeah.
And the joke at that time was that, the top Canadian students wanted to compete with Google and the top American students wanted to be Google.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
or Canadians want to sell to Google. Americans want to be Google. Yeah.
So I mean, I think that mentality's gotten a bit better. I think probably because of the situation with Trump, there's some scope for understanding the actual situation in the economic situation and the comparative situation in Canada.
Yeah.
The past decade, economically, it's been not good.
Yeah.
Productivity improvements are not good. A lot of this is because of the money that flowed into the housing sector from other sectors. But the gaps have opened up, and I think now more people are open to the idea that
we're poorer than Alabama.
Yeah, exactly. As the Globe Mail article said. So we need to make some kind of reforms, and that might allow us to get around some of those architectural constraints and even cultural constraints where you might get some young people to think my goal is more than house in the suburbs and a job at RBC is not what the smartest people in the country should be doing.
Yeah. And interesting, it might be that now because the house in the suburbs has been become too expensive. Maybe but they're forced into being more ambitious because they don't have a choice. There is no house in the suburbs they can afford.
Obviously, on the other hand, there is a risk. I think Canada's biggest risk. So the biggest benefit for Canada, despite the current politics, is that next door to the richest country in the world, same time zone, mostly same language, so little cultural difference that I think the average American couldn't identify the Canadians they see on TV. The guy who reads the nightly news in the US is Canadian. Yeah. No one even knows.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a huge advantage economically. But the downside is that if France and the US open up a 30% gap in incomes, for example, France isn't losing their top talent.
Right.
It's too big of a cultural leap.
Right.
Canada loses a lot of top talent when the income gaps open up. And, they've opened up. So in my profession, I had a couple colleagues go to, I'm not talking about Harvard, I'm talking about Texas A&M, UC Santa Barbara. that's $100,000 pay raise.
Yeah.
If they leave.
Yeah.
Or public sector workers. Okay.
Yeah, probably into markets where housing is more affordable.
Maybe not Santa Barbara.
Yeah, maybe not Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Texas A&M. Yeah.
Santa Barbara has the other
better barbecue. Yeah.
Or and if you're going like in areas like tech, I mean, doubling would not be unusual.
Yeah.
So it's really, it's really hard to, once that productivity gap opens up, it becomes even harder to fix the domestic problem
because you're losing your best people.
You're losing really good people. And when we talk about that right tail human capital, like the people who are starting the businesses that create new jobs, that's not that many people in society.
Yeah.
And they don't grow on trees.
Yeah.
And
they have a disproportionate impact if you find a way to hold on to them.
Yeah. To a large extent, like we benefit, perversely from how hard it is to immigrate to the US. Because if we ever had free flow of labor, then I think we'd be in real trouble.
Yeah, I think it could be tougher. It's not that far off from free for
highly talented, definitely.
At the moment.
But I think we lose all the people who are too young to yet know whether they're genius or whatever.
But also, even if you're just an electrician in Canada, you'd probably, if you had the option, you'd go be an electrician in the US. If you were,
the pay would go up quick.
The pay would go up, your housing costs would go down, you'd live in a warmer climate. Like there's all these things that are
even if you live in the US or you live in Canada, you're an electrician to move from Toronto to Airdrie in Alberta, or move from New York to Atlanta.
Yeah.
You're seeing net of housing, a huge raise in your pay.
Yeah.
So that's why we're seeing that kind of net movement.
And I don't think anyone's taking it seriously enough given that, because it's actually a good point. You get into this kind of vicious cycle where it gets worse and worse and harder the more the gap opens up. So I don't know, not to get into too politically sensitive an area, but there's obviously huge resistance to being a 51st state, and we're all proud Canadians. But then a good number of these Canadians actually just moved to the US to the 50 states, and it's well, can we at least do our best to retain people?
Yeah. So I think what makes it really tough is that how I would retain some of those people involve reforms that would not be popular.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? The easiest way to retain highly talented people is to let them keep a larger fraction of the value they create.
Sure.
But that's,
as in cut taxes.
Yeah.
And high marginal rates.
Yeah. The marginal rate is 54%.
Yeah.
Ontario.
Yeah.
We had a bill before the last election, before Trudeau stepped down, that would have, venture capital is already in trouble. It would have just ended the venture capital industry in Ontario.
Yeah.
And this would have passed if we hadn't had the
You're talking about the capital gains increase.
The particular way that was written was the worst possible way to incentivize people to put capital into
this. Is what you're talking about with this vicious cycle, because the remaining people just want to grab more from what they perceive to be the richest in society. And so they're and this was effectively a wealth tax in disguise, but I think Carney had a little bit more sense about him to be able to say, hey, that's something that's going to be unproductive.
I understand why it's tough, though, because if you were if you might not want to do this kind of thing in France, but you don't lose that many people when you do it in France.
Yeah.
Because of the Canada-US cultural similarity, you really can lose a lot of, forget about, people starting companies. It's hard for the Maple Leafs to decide what they want because of the tax system, There's a reason Brad Marchand's down in Florida.
Yeah.
How do we end on some optimism here? Because we're like I said, proud Canadians, committed to the country and to the city. And we're trying to think of a big part of this podcast is thinking about ways in which we could do things smarter. And often that's despite, the best intentions of our political leadership. What are some kind of nice things you're seeing, some reasons for optimism? What's going well?
The direction is 100% positive.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So whatever you think about Toronto's building code and zoning issues,
they're improving.
They were worse 10 years ago.
Yeah.
About that.
Yeah.
The kind of ambition of young people, it's improving. The even economic policy since the last election is on a good path.
Yeah.
So that's positive. There's a lot of ground, I think, to make up. There are many ways it could be worse. The extent of growth in Toronto, the physical structure of Toronto is amazing, actually.
Totally.
You know what I mean? You grew up here 30 years ago as a driving range and parking lot.
Yeah.
So, that's a lot better now. But I say it's a lot better because the one cultural change when it comes to progress that we just need to kind of stuff down people's throats in Canada is that it's better than it was is like wildly different from it's as good as it could be.
Yeah.
And the mentality should be like, why are we doing that? We don't have to do it that way. We don't have to do it that way. We don't have to do it that way. We can actually literally tomorrow fix these problems. We can, like, as individuals, literally tomorrow be the person that puts that bench there on the sidewalk instead of the person that sits down on the bench.
Yeah.
And the kind of more that mentality of high ambition society, the more the mentality of, I define progress.
High agency.
Yeah, I define progress as directed human action to improve the standard of living. All is important. You do it, you do something, it's on purpose, makes things better. Like, that's within the ability of every person, whether they're like a city councillor or a premier or just
an average citizen.
Yeah, we can all do that. And I think it should be like seen as the same way you see, this person's immoral, like they cheat on their spouse. I think you see that person, they're not contributing to the future of society.
Well, we already cast NIMBYs as immoral characters, so that's the purpose of this podcast.
I think maybe one like silver lining also to this productivity and prosperity gap between us and the U.S. is like, if you're at the frontier, maybe it's harder to imagine that better is possible. Now it's very clear because even Alabama is better, so like you don't have to look far to imagine a better world. So again,
these poor Alabamans that
we unfairly stereotype as being very poor
state.
But you know what I mean? Like it used to be when we were
they got 2 football teams that beat the best CFL.
It's not hard to imagine that we could be 30% richer because our neighbors to the south are 30% richer, or whatever the number is.
It's not like they got different gene pools there, different water. You know what I mean? Like, we know that's in the set of things that we can achieve. And likewise, honestly, like, there's no trade-offs. Like, if you're in Alabama, you should be looking up and saying, like, how come I don't have the infant mortality rate of Ontario?
Totally.
There's no contradiction between having the new Eli Lilly plant and also having lower. You can do both.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so,
I think that's a great optimistic note to end on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Kevin.
Cheers.